In the world of Naruto, everybody has a favorite jutsu. Whether that be the characters in the show or us as the watchers, we all have jutsus we love seeing busted out, and the characters all have jutsus they love using. Naruto loves his Rasengan, Sasuke loves his Chidori, Kakashi loves his Kamui, and therefore chances are if you're watching Naruto and you're watching somebody use a jutsu, it's a jutsu you've seen used before. Because of this, us as watchers get favorites. We talk about the overwhelming strength of our favorite jutsu and how Kamui's a lot stronger than even you realize. However, unfortunately, the general overusage of a couple of different jutsus throughout the duration of Naruto has led, in my opinion, to a fair amount of fairly standard jutsus in the Naruto universe becoming severely overrated. See, because yes, absolutely, there is a situation for every jutsu in the Naruto universe, and any jutsu, if used correctly, can be used with devastating results. But at the end of the day, some jutsu just get a bit more props than they deserve. And today, I want to talk about those jutsus, because today I want to talk about the top 10 most overrated jutsus in Naruto, ranked and explained. But before we get to ranking or explaining anything, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. So, what is the metric with which we're measuring whether or not a jutsu is overrated today? Well, unfortunately, calling something over and or underrated is kind of subjective. So today, we're just going to be focusing on jutsus that I believe are talked about in a capacity that they don't necessarily deserve. The number one spot having the highest discrepancy between what I believe is the actual usefulness of a jutsu and its perceived usefulness from the community. So with no further ado, let's get directly into our last place spot, which is actually kind of our first place spot on this list, as at number 10, we have our least overrated jutsu on this entire list: mind-body swapping technique. See, there are arguments to be made that the iconic Yamanaka clan jutsu of the mind-body swap technique could be placed on both lists about underrated and overrated jutsus. Because unfortunately, the relevance of this jutsu kind of boils down to when you're talking about in the Naruto universe, and also what iteration of the mind-body technique that you're speaking of. Listen, because when it comes down to it, I personally never really heard anybody hype up the Yamanaka ability to swap their consciousness into somebody else's body, at least in a one-on-one capacity. Sure, you're able to access all of the memories of the person you swap into. It's a really good reconnaissance tool. You're able to control their body. It's not a transformation technique, so you pass all possible checks in chakra signature and scent, and therefore as a spying technique, it's actually one of the more robust and well-rounded abilities in Naruto. Now, obviously, using the technique does leave your body completely defenseless, which is a massive negative, but if you have a team that's built around the idea of you using your mind-body swap technique like Team 10, then fortunately you should have some people to watch over your body. Like I said, I really don't think there's anybody out there championing for the idea of the mind-body swap technique, at least on a one-on-one basis. However, as Naruto progresses and all of the characters in Naruto need to remain relevant, the Yamanaka clan ability that was originally just the ability to swap their consciousness into somebody else's body changed pretty exponentially, as we originally got things like Ino's father showing us the mind disturbance technique that allowed for him to control entire groups of ninja without leaving his body, though control is doing a lot of work here, as basically all he was able to do was force his opponents to fight who was ever closest to them. But then really the biggest step up in power was revealed in the Fourth Great Shinobi World War, and kind of in the lead up to it, the Yamanaka were established as basically the cell phone towers of the ninja world, being able to connect the thoughts of the entirety of the Shinobi Alliance. And because of this massive step up in power for the Yamanaka clan and their ability to act as the brain of an entire shinobi force, a lot of people started to talk about the abilities of the Yamanaka like they were the most important abilities in any large force of shinobi. And I can't blame them. Communication is absolutely massive, and when Anoichi, Ino's father, died when the Ten Tails bombed the nerve center of the Shinobi Alliance, Ino was able to step in pretty much flawlessly and keep the entirety of the Shinobi Alliance connected through their thoughts. So how is this jutsu overrated? Well, it was kind of a dumb plan to rely on Inochi in the first place. It's revealed in the prologue, not even in the land of Wavesark, in Team 7's literal first ever displayed mission, that radios with earpieces exist, allowing for wireless transmission between teams to coordinate their movements. And these radios and earpieces are shown time and time again, so as to why the biggest ever unified military force in the history of the ninja world decided to not use these radios and instead rely on the brain of one man. I don't think I'll ever genuinely genuinely understand. It's never established that they don't have the network or the technology or the manufacturing to make that many radios. They just kind of show these radios occasionally, and then in the biggest, most important, most radio-centric possible scenario, they're like, oh yeah, head of the Yamanaka clan's got it. He'll keep us all connected. We just gotta hook him up to some kind of matrix mount that pulls over his eyes and head. Now, obviously, the mind-body technique and the ability to communicate telepathically is now once again important in Boruto, as it's only telepathic communications that can't be interpreted by Ada. Which is why the mind-body technique, and really just kind of a catch-all of all of the Yamanaka abilities, are sitting at our number 10 spot. Slightly overrated, but not that much. But if that incredibly lukewarm take didn't get your blood boiling, boy oh boy, do I got something for you at number 9, because coming up at number 9, we got Kamui. Yes, Kamui, widely regarded as one of, if not the strongest jutsu in all of Naruto. Undoubtedly, the strongest Mangekyo Sharingan ability that one can acquire, with the possible exception of Tsukiyomi. Kamui, especially when wielded with both eyes, is one of the most terrifying jutsus in all of Naruto. Even when only wielded in one eye by the likes of Kakashi and Obito simultaneously, just that one eye of Kamui made them both Kage-level threats. So Nick, how on God's green earth can one of the strongest Mangekyo Sharingan abilities of all time be overrated? I mean, you yourself just acknowledged the fact that it is one of the strongest abilities in all of Naruto, so how can you overrate one of the strongest abilities in all of Naruto? Well, as you can see, A, it's pretty low on this list. I do fully acknowledge the fact that Kamui, whether it's Obito's version of Kamui or Kakashi's version of Kamui, that kind of blend into one just general version of Kamui by the end of the story, as by the end of the story it appears as though Obito is able to use Kakashi's kind of Kamui and vice versa, is one of, if not the strongest jutsu in all of Naruto. However, the only real reason that Kamui seems as ridiculously broken to us as it does isn't necessarily because of the Kamui ability itself, but rather who's using it. See, while Kamui in Kakashi's hands is a versatile and dangerous weapon that allows for him to do things like teleporting away an Ashall killing bone that was meant to kill Sasuke, teleporting a nail from the Devapath that was meant to kill him, ripping off Deidara's arm, and even attempting to rip off the head of the Ten Tails, Kamui time and time again proved to be one of the most dangerous jutsus of all time when wielded by Kakashi. But by far and away, Kakashi in the hands of Obito was a much scarier jutsu. One, because Obito in some capacity also showed the ability to Kamui things outside of his body, and two, because Obito was able to use Kamui limitlessly. See, it's established multiple times throughout the duration of the Fourth Great Shinobi World War, when Kakashi is using Kamui more than he ever has before, that he is going blind, and quickly. And all in all, over the course of the entirety of Naruto, we don't see Kakashi use Kamui more than 20 or so times, which means while the jutsu was able to do things like save lives and rip arms off Akatsuki members, it's a jutsu that can't be used more than 30 or so times before you go blind. Now, mind you, since Kakashi's Kamui is more offensively focused, it's used substantially less than Obito's more defensively focused Kamui. But if we applied the same 30 or so usage rules to the defensively oriented Kamui of Obito, he would have been blind by the end of his fight against Minato. And therefore, while we all look at the Kamui as this insanely broken jutsu, fundamentally we can really only think about it that way because Obito's body is half white Zetsu and therefore half Hashirama cells. So he's able to be completely invulnerable from basically any and all attacks, because there is no consequences in him using his Kamui as often as he wants to. So while Kamui is crazy powerful, it's more that Obito is crazy powerful. And in actuality, there's a lot of better invulnerability jutsu out there, like the Hozuki's Hydrification, Hidan's Immortality, or Konan's Dance of the Shikigami. But enough of these high-level, slightly overrated jutsu. Let's get to one of the most basal core jutsus that every single ninja know, that's now become overrated, unfortunately. Because coming up at number 8, we have the Substitution Jutsu. Yes, the Substitution Jutsu. One of, if not the first jutsu that every single ninja learns. The ability to, right before a ninja is struck, to grab a piece of wood or debris or really anything, turn it into their body, and then disappear off to a different location so that that piece of wood or something else can be struck by the incoming attack. And for almost the entirety of Part 1 of Naruto, this was by far and away the most used jutsu we saw. Whether it was Kakashi using the Substitution Jutsu against Sasuke's kunai, Kakashi using the Substitution Jutsu jutsu against the Demon Brothers. Kakashi using the substitution jutsu against Zabuza. Really, just Kakashi using the substitution jutsu any opportunity he could ever possibly get. But he wasn't the only one using it. Basically, any high-level ninja, the second that they got hit, immediately turned into a log. And even though the jutsu does take a step back in terms of importance as Naruto's story continues, it does still pop up occasionally, even in the latest parts of Naruto Shippuden. So why is it overrated? Well, one, the jutsu itself requires an insane amount of speed to pull off. While we don't necessarily have 100% confirmation on how exactly the substitution jutsu works, there's only two logical ways to possibly explain how the body replacement technique could possibly work. The first possible explanation is that ninjas carry full logs with them wherever they go, and they transform those logs into themselves right before they're struck and then go somewhere else in order to launch a surprise attack against the person who believes they just killed their opponent. And while this is technically a possibility, as the ninja tool pockets that every ninja seems to have appear to be bottomless, what seems more likely here, though not by much, is that a ninja is using some kind of supersonic speed to grab some local debris, transform that debris into their own body, and then disappear into the darkness so they can launch their counter attack. However, in either of these scenarios, dodging would basically do the exact same thing. Because what do you mean you have enough time to pull an entire log out of your pocket, transform it into you, and then hide somewhere else so you can launch a counterattack? If you have the level of speed to pull that off in the first place, why don't you just dodge and land a counterattack? Fundamentally, if you can pull off a substitution jutsu, you should be able to kill that person while they're attacking. Especially if the latter circumstance of a ninja going and sourcing a log from somewhere nearby and then transforming that log into them just so that they can trick their opponent for half a second is the true scenario in which body replacement technique works. On top of that, as Naruto progresses, substitution jutsu just kind of gets outscaled, as better ways to replace yourself on the battlefield pop up over time. Things like lightning and explosive shadow clones. Replacements of your body that, when struck, put the person striking it in a disadvantageous situation, as opposed to them just hitting a log that used to be you. But as this is one of the very few jutsu that's based off literal real-life ninjutsu used by real-life ninjas, obviously it had to play a pretty central role in Naruto. But you know a jutsu that definitely wasn't used by real ninja? Our number 7 spot, because coming up at number 7, we got Lava Release. And I'm talking all forms here. See, Kekkei Genkai are very rare within the confines of Naruto until the end of Naruto, when basically everybody has a Kekkei Genkai of some form. However, at least in the beginning parts of Naruto, Kekkei Genkai were exceedingly rare. So rare that the first Kekkei Genkai that we're introduced to, Ice Release with Haku, literally got Haku's entire clan eradicated. And thus, pretty much any time that a Kekkei Genkai was introduced in Naruto, it was immediately lofted into the highest ranks of jutsu. But as time went on, and we eventually ended up with 32 total Kekkei Genkai, some of the Kekkei Genkai along the way didn't really live up to the hype that we believed all Kekkei Genkai should. And there is no case of that more pertinent than with Lava Release. See, Lava Release exists in a bunch of different ways, 5 to be exact. That is the molten rock forms, the acidic forms, the corrosive quicklime forms, the vulcanized rubber forms, and the volcanic ash forms. Now, naturally, one would believe with a Kekkei Genkai with this much variety that it would be one of the strongest Kekkei Genkai in all of Naruto, and the way that a lot of people talk about Lava Release in the Naruto fandom would have you believing that. And while we have seen Lava Release users do some impressive things, like being able to burn Naruto through his KCM1 cloak, using vulcanized rubber to completely negate basically all lightning jutsu, or even, most impressively, used by Naruto in his Lava Release Rasen Shuriken to cut down the God Tree, fundamentally when it comes down to it, Lava Release has never been used in an offensive capability successfully against any ninja of note, with the exception of Naruto's Lava Release Rasen Shurikens, but that's Naruto, and it's a Sage Art boosted Rasen Shuriken. Just like with Obito, that has a lot more to do with Naruto than the Kekkei Genkai applied to his Rasen Shuriken. So whether it's Son Goku or Roshi slinging molten rock that never hits anybody, Mai using acidic mud to melt walls and that's basically it, or Koretsuchi using volcanic ash to hold down Kinshiki until he was summoned to Momoshiki, really when it comes down to it, whenever Lava Release is pulled out, it doesn't actually accomplish all that much. But since we're talking about jutsu that in actuality don't really accomplish all that much, let's head to our number 6 spot, because at number 6, we got Shadow Possession Jutsu. Now listen, calm down. I know what you're gonna say. Oh, but Shikamaru was able to use Shadow Possession Jutsu to kill Hidan. And Shikamaru has shown time and time again that Shadow Possession Jutsu has been incredibly useful on the battlefield. Nick, what are you talking about? Whether it was the battle against Hidan, Tamari, or Asuma, Shikamaru has shown that Shadow Possession Jutsu, when used correctly, is one of the most powerful jutsu in all of Naruto. It 100% deserves the hype. And it's thinking like that, which is why Shadow Possession Jutsu is on the list. Listen, fundamentally, as a jutsu, Shadow Possession Jutsu isn't that good. One of the strongest ever users of Shadow Possession Jutsu, Shikamaru in his prime, which was Naruto Shippuden, was barely able to, with a combination of Shadow Possession Jutsu and Shadow Stitching Jutsu, to hold down the weakest member of the Akatsuki in Hidan. On top of this, Shadow Possession Jutsu can be fully resisted by anybody strong enough. Shadow Possession Jutsu, the second you get somebody under your control, is a tug-of-war. If that person is strong enough to resist your control, they don't have to go anywhere. But even if they are weak enough that you can pilot them, it's an incredibly exhaustive jutsu. As Shikamaru has shown us time and time again that using Shadow Possession Jutsu for any extended amount of time drains him of any and all chakra. On top of this, members of the Nara clan have to wear their kunai in a different location because when they make somebody reach into their kunai bag and slit their own throat, they're at risk of doing that to themselves if they have a kunai in their hand. And don't even get me started on how incredibly easy it is to break a Shadow Possession. If anybody from outside of this current Shadow Possession exchange jumps into this battle and attacks the person who's Shadow Possessing 1 to 20 or so people, on top of that, if the Nara in question using Shadow Possession here has to jump off the ground and their shadow disappears from the ground, the Shadow Possession is broken immediately. But Nick, what about Shadow Strangle? Yes, you're right. Incredibly skillful members of the Nara clan are able to creep their shadow up somebody's body and choke them to death. You know, unless that person is able to resist their Shadow Strangle, or is too strong to be choked out by a Nara shadow. Because it was established in Shikamaru's light novel that Shikamaru no longer has the ability to break trees with his Shadow Strangle, and he's the 8th Hokage. Listen, Shadow Possession falls into the exact same categorization as Obito and the Kamui. The only reason we believe it's an even slightly impressive jutsu is because everybody who uses it is a tactical genius with an IQ over 200. Give the Shadow Possession Jutsu to anybody else, and it is quite literally the least useful jutsu on the battlefield. On top of that, give quite literally any other jutsu set to the Nara, and they would have been 10 times more powerful. But at least Shadow Possession accomplished a couple of things during its tenure in the Naruto universe. However, the same cannot be said for our number 5 entry, because coming up at number 5, we have Particle Style, also known as Dust Release. Dust Release, just like Kamui, is often regarded as one of, if not the most powerful jutsu in all of Naruto. And for good reason. It is the only Kekitoda that we know of. A combination of Earth, Wind, and Fire release in a geometrical shape that destroys anything that it comes into contact with on an atomic level. However, while Dust Release is talked about as the most terrifying jutsu in all of Naruto, it is never used successfully against any opponent ever. Yes, Inoki's ability to use Particle Style made Madara identify him, even in his 80s, as the most dangerous out of the 5 Kage standing against him. And that was because of Inoki's Dust Release, and the fact that Inoki would be able to defeat Madara's Susanoo. However, in every circumstance where we see Dust Release used, it either misses or is halted. See, unfortunately, the key user of Dust Release that we knew of in the Naruto timeline was Inoki, who was a genin when Madara was in his prime, and therefore, by the time of the 4th Great Shinobi World War rolled around, he was far beyond his prime. And while other Dust Release users like Mu were introduced into the story, as it was relayed to us that Dust Release was so incredibly dangerous for any ninja to go up against that the only way to fight against it was with your own Dust Release. The fight against Mu involves Gaara, Naruto, and Inoki. 3 people that Mu absolutely wasn't gonna atomically dismantle. And thus, in actuality, the closest we ever got to seeing Dust Release possibly work was when Inoki caught Sasuke in his Dust Release square that Obito saved him from. But this right here also speaks to the weaknesses of Dust Release. One requires an insane amount of chakra, so much so that Inoki, with half of his chakra left in the 4th Great Shinobi World War, identified that he wouldn't be able to use it unless he got more chakra back. And 2, because creating chakra release requires incredibly precise hand movements. If your hands are hit or bound in any capacity whatsoever, the Dust Release kind of blows up on you. And these incredibly precise hand movements and the creation of this geometrical shape takes a fair amount of time, at least relative to a lot of other ninjutsu. And thus, time and time again, even though Dust Blast release has the most destructive capability out of any jutsu we've seen in Naruto, it is either dodged or hindered before it does any real damage. But since we're talking about jutsu that are described as ridiculously powerful but never really do anything, we should talk about our number 4 entry, because coming up at number 4, we have the Uchiha Great Fireball Technique. Or, as I like to call it, the Ki Blast of the Naruto universe. Listen. Fire Jutsu is notoriously very weak in the Naruto universe, with really the only time that fire release was ever shown as being actually intimidating coming from Madara. See, the Uchiha Great Fireball Technique is kind of just one step up from throwing kunai at the beginning of a fight. That is to say that the Great Fireball Technique is usually the opening move of an Uchiha who's attacking an opponent. However, unfortunately for the Uchiha in question here, either that Great Fireball Technique is either extinguished with water release, blocked with earth release, or cut in half by attacking certain chakra nodes. Or just straight up dodged, and this happens time and time again. Whether it's Obito stealing Kakashi's hand sign and hitting him with a point-blank fireball jutsu that does nothing, or Sasuke doing the same exact thing to Naruto, the fireball jutsu from everybody not named Naruto has never even accomplished what would seem like the relatively paltry goal of even scorching the clothes of the person affected by it. This does not apply to Madara, as Madara's fire release Great Fire Annihilation, which is kind of a step up from the Great Fireball Technique, was so incredibly powerful that it required an entire squadron of water users from the Shinobi Alliance to cancel it out. Madara was also able to cover the entire battlefield in gigantic fiery meteors that some of the ninjas of the Shinobi Alliance were either to douse with water or block with earth, but the majority of them were simply destroyed by. However, just like we said with the Kamui and Obito, and the lava release in Naruto, that is more a symptom of the person using it than the jutsu itself. And so, Great Fireball Technique gets our number 4 spot on this list. But we're not done with the Uchiha yet, because coming up at number 3, we got Kirin. Yeah, you knew a Sasuke jutsu was gonna be on this list. Listen, Kirin is a cool looking jutsu and a powerful one. So powerful that it almost killed Itachi. You know, like end of life Itachi, but still Itachi. However, Kirin is just not a practical jutsu. Kirin is incredibly unique in how it works in the Naruto universe, as the lightning controlled by Sasuke is actual lightning, not lightning created by chakra. And therefore, Kirin is still actually a very feasible jutsu even now in Boruto, as Kirin couldn't be absorbed by things like a karma marking or a Rinnegan, and also couldn't be shrunken by things like Sukuna Hikona. But Nick, everything you're describing about Kirin makes it sound like it's a ridiculously powerful and very useful jutsu. I mean, if Itachi wasn't able to get his Susanoo out, he would have died to it. So how can it possibly be overrated? Well, one, it travels at the speed of lightning, which is fast. However, now within the confines of the Naruto universe, where the majority of the higher end threats are all very easily FTL to FTL plus, the speed of lightning, which is nowhere close to the speed of light, mind you, is a relatively slow attack. This is why Itachi, on his literal deathbed, was able to summon his entire Susanoo around him to guard himself from Kirin, even though he had never seen it before and was surprised by its launching. On top of the fact that it just simply hasn't power scaled all that well from a speed perspective, it's also a one and done jutsu. The usage of Kirin pulls all of the lightning out of the thunderclouds that exist above Sasuke, and therefore Kirin cannot be used twice in combat unless Sasuke uses some kind of high-level flame release to create more thunderclouds, and that's only if Sasuke's battle starts under thunderclouds. If Sasuke is fighting a battle on a clear day, he has to create his own thunderclouds using high-level fire release before he can even think about using Kirin in the first place, and that's a ridiculous amount of setup for a jutsu that was blocked by Itachi at his quite literal weakest. So while it is an S-rank jutsu and one of the cooler looking ones in the entirety of Naruto, it is unfortunately very overrated. But we're not done with the Uchiha, because coming up at number 2, we got Kotoamatsukami, also known by many as the most powerful genjutsu in Naruto. And listen, in how it's described, it maybe should be talked about in that capacity. Kotoamatsukami allows the user to enter into the mind of anybody within their vision, and then edit their mind so completely and without trace that the person is altered permanently and they don't even know. In fact, in chapter 459, Kotoamatsukami is referred to as genjutsu in its highest possible state. However, to the average user of the Kotoamatsukami, each eye can only fire off this highest caliber of genjutsu once a decade, meaning that your average ninja who lives to maybe 75, 80 would only be able to use Kotoamatsukami during their lifetime, assuming they awoke their MS at 10, which is highly unlikely, mind you. I know, Shisui unlocked his MS at 7, but even Shisui, if he had only lived to the age of 80, would have only been able to use Kotoamatsukami 16 times, maybe? And that's because Shisui didn't have access to Hashirama's cells. And therefore, so far as we know, Shisui never used Kotoamatsukami. Well, yes, Shisui's plan was to use Kotoamatsukami to change Fugaku's mind into no longer wanting to launch the Uchiha coup. He gets stopped by Danzo before he's even able to try that. And while yes, Danzo does establish that with Hashirama's cells, that the only real restriction is that he can't use Kotoamatsukami more than once a day. Even in the one time that Danzo uses Kotoamatsukami, he gets caught. And not only does he get caught, but the person he places under Kotoamatsukami is immediately broken out of it. And while yes, the Kotoamatsukami was able to break Itachi out of the brainwashing of Kabuto, who brought him back using Edo Tensei, and that's very powerful, Itachi identified that this crow that had the Kotoamatsukami wouldn't be able to use it for another 10 years, and therefore he decided, whatever, kill the crow. So does Kotoamatsukami have a terrifying capability to pull off genjutsu of the highest caliber? Yes, 100%. But does it have a 10-year cooldown and can be broken out of as easily as any other genjutsu in existence? Also, yeah. Now, there is some theories that state that both of the Kotoamatsukami eyes work separately. That is to say that one of them has a shorter cooldown and places people under a genjutsu they can be broken out of, and one of them has a longer cooldown and places people under a genjutsu that they can't be broken out of. That is just, unfortunately, a theory. So the Kotoamatsukami gets our number 2 spot. Don't worry, we're not done with Uchiha yet, because coming up at our number 1 spot is Amaterasu. Listen, a lot of the MS abilities are kind of bad. Kamui, good. Tsukiyomi, good. Koretsuchi, good. But whatever the problems are with the Great Fireball technique, multiply that by 10 and you get Amaterasu. Amaterasu has never, and I mean never, worked in any meaningful capacity whatsoever. The most meaningful thing and or person that was ever killed through the usage of Amaterasu was one of the summonings of the summoning path. I think it was the bird, but it also might have been the dog. I don't remember exactly. That and Yagura, who was hit in a filler episode with Amaterasu in his version 2 Jinchuriki cloak form, but the Amaterasu blaze didn't kill Yagura. It put him out of the fight, but Itachi was also out of the fight because he was out of chakra and Juzo was dead. And also, that happens in filler. In all other scenarios of just Amaterasu usage, I'm not talking about Koretsuchi here, Amaterasu was either blocked, sealed, sliced off, or just straight up dodged. Or in the case of Edo Tensei Nagato and Itachi's battle, simply pushed off with almighty push. And thus, Amaterasu has a lot of the same drawbacks that we've heard from a lot of the jutsu on this list thus far. It's slow enough that it's rather easily dodged by any high-level opponent. It's made of chakra, so it can be absorbed, pushed off, blocked, or simply cut off in the case of the 4th Raikage or Killer Bee. It's incredibly chakra depletive to the point where Itachi was only able to use it once, maybe twice in combat, and it's also a large reason as to why Itachi went blind at the age of like 20. So for being one of the most beloved and feared jutsu in all of Naruto, when in actuality it's kind of pointless, Amaterasu gets our number 1 most overrated jutsu in all of Naruto. So yeah, the Uchiha have a lot of overrated jutsu, but the Uchiha are just kind of overrated in general, so that kind of makes sense. But I'm curious to hear from you guys. What do you believe are the most overrated jutsu in all of Naruto? Let me know in the comments below. And while you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to hide from the comments of this video.